Welcome back to Following Know It On, a Stormlight podcast. This week is episode 51, and we're doing chapters 30 through 39 of Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. We are getting into the actual content of the story. We've got a few twists coming up in this episode. Just a quick 20-second of how we're feeling. Elliot, we'll start with you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. The twist that I was waiting for definitely came in this section. I knew something had to come that was going to really turn our story on its head, and I think we got it for the most part. It took a rather unexpectedly dark turn, though. I wasn't ready for that. It got a little dark there for a little while.
It did. Paul, how are you feeling?
Horrible. Don't ask.
Why are you feeling horrible?
No, I'm just being dramatic. No reason related to our story or in real life. I was just being silly. In regards to our podcast, I'm feeling good. Feeling ready to talk about this. But nothing super notable. We saw Hoyd. Spoiler alert.
Oh, spoiler.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing okay. I do want to talk. We can talk about Hoyd. You guys want to talk about Hoyd?
No.
Yes.
So I will admit that I was trying to bait you guys in that when I was asking who Hoyd was and if we'd seen him under a different name so far, I knew we hadn't seen him, and I was just trying to lead you astray.
You misled us. Our fearless
Terrible.
leader.
I trusted you.
Yeah.
See,
I never did.
little do you guys know, I've done this in the past. We just haven't gotten to it yet. So,
Oh dear.
Hi guys, my name is Trevor, and I'm really funny.
Yeah.
And lead everyone astray.
See,
These are my character traits.
our spoiler channels in the Discord really enjoy it when I do that type of thing, and they all get to laugh at you guys with me. But you guys,
You all are terrible people
Yeah.
for laughing at us.
So you're just like doing it because you think you're cool.
Because I can. Yes, exactly.
Do you think this makes you cool?
It does.
Leading us astray. Okay,
Terrible.
it's not very cool, Trevor.
What are you guys' thoughts on Hoyd's appearance here in the book?
I hated it. No, I'm sorry.
Paul's sassy today.
I'll put it away. I was really happy whenever Hoyd was mentioned, just because I was like, oh, okay, wait, someone I kind of know. And I will say, this before we get into actual discussion about this, I'm sorry. Timeline wise, this adds up, right, with Shallan being Light Song, because Hoyd is an old man here. We see Hoyd; he's much more aged, right? He's like the wizened old fellow.
Okay.
Almost and stuff.
So Hoyd's age is the big thing I took away from this chapter as well. Actually, I was trying to figure it out because Siri thinks he's old at first, but then I think there's a comment in there where kind of partway through she's like, "Well, hang on a second, is he actually older? Or is he still like kind of young underneath this stuff?" So I too was trying to place this in like a timeline. Is this Hoyd after Stormlight Archives where we've seen him, or is this Hoyd before all of that? I wasn't honestly sure. I want to say after, where you're going with, Paul, which does support your rather farcical theories, but
Yeah.
that seems to be where I'm leaning, but maybe not though. I mean, Hoyd's kind of a bit of an enigma to begin with, right? Does he even age at all? Do we even know?
Yeah, that was one thing I thought of. I was like, if this is in the future, it's got to be like way in the future, right? Because haven't like doesn't in Stormlight Archive, I believe he references just like he's been around a long time. You know, he's seen all this stuff or whatever. So I'm assuming he's much older than a normal age person in Stormlight Archive. So here, if he is old, then I'm assuming that he's like much older. Like I'm assuming he ages slowly. But
As far as appearance in Stormlight Archive goes, I'm fairly certain he's supposed to look somewhere between the age of Adolin and Dalinar, like not in the Dalinar generation, but certainly older than the Adolin Kaladin generation, somewhere like his maybe early 40s era.
yeah, I've kind of envisioned him as like 35-ish.
Yeah.
Like around there. So
I was trying to figure out too in this scene if we could learn about how much breath he has, because we were theorizing before about some of the passages we got from Hoyd back in, I think it was Words of Radiance, but was it Way of Kings?
It was
Words of Radiance.
It was Words of Radiance.
Yeah, about how it seems possibly hinting at the fact that Hoyd perhaps has some of these heightenings, some of these ability to hear perfect pitches and things like that. So I was trying to get a sense of like just how much breath does he have, because that could maybe tell us like what he's capable of or what other powers he has. But there doesn't seem to be a reference to that. It didn't seem like they noticed, oh, here's a storyteller with tons of breath or something like that. But I know one of the heightenings is kind of like agelessness, right? Where they don't age after once they have enough. So that might throw a wrench in our dating effort to try and figure out where we're at in the timeline here.
I'm really happy, Paul, that you're just gonna full send with your Shallan and Light Song theory, and you're just gonna back it up 100%, and you're not worried at all that you might be wrong.
You're right. I am not worried at all that it might be wrong. Because I mean, I'm still looking at it honestly. Like, let's look and see if there's anything that doesn't add up, and then we'll discount it. But as of right now, it's my for lying theory.
It's true until proven otherwise.
Effectively, and it's also the most exciting one I can come up with right now. So
that may be challenging though, because right off the bat for this episode in chapter 30, Lightsong is starting to like rediscover some of his skills, right?
Yeah.
He figures out that he can he can juggle. He's trying to do pottery, but he fails at pottery, right?
Right.
Fails at pottery, but he can like sail and he can do math. So like juggling, sailing, and math. So something we maybe have to look at is, can Shallan do those things? Or is Shallan going to learn those things later on in her life before she dies and then comes back as Lightsong? That could be some clues we could look at for you, Paul.
Very fair. And we have seen Shallan on several boats throughout our story, so
you've seen
we haven't seen juggling yet. From what I can remember,
you've seen her on one boat twice. Let's get that clear. It was the same boat. It was
okay. A boat's a boat, right? Like,
I'm trying to remember what the
so
name
she's
of that
more.
boat is.
You say she's been on this boat multiple times, so she's experienced, right? She knows
the wind's pleasure. That's what that name of the boat is.
She knows her way around a boat, so that one's good. I haven't seen juggling yet. I will be honest. So I'll keep my eye out for that with Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. So I'll keep my eye out for some Shallan juggling.
Yeah. Are we still enjoying Lightsong's chapters here? He's trying his best to stay nonchalant and casual with the court, but he's actually getting invested in like his own life, and that's not a normal thing for a god. And Blushweaver kind of calls him out on it too, of like, you're acting really weird.
I definitely still am. In fact, I think I've even more enjoyed some of Lightsong's content here in this segment, even though we didn't quite see as much of him through some of these segments. I think we saw a little more of Vivenna, quite a bit of Vivenna in some of these chapters. But I am enjoying Lightsong's journey of self-rediscovery, if you will, I guess. his banter with his priest is still some of the best.
Larimar.
So I've been more interested in the Syrian Sebron stuff because it feels the storyline because it feels more like they're like the center of what I imagine the top issue in our story has been. I guess kind of the most relevant circle there. So we've seen a lot of Vivenna and Light Song, and Vivenna stuff has gotten really exciting, like really intense. But I don't know. I honestly don't have an answer as to why I haven't been interested in Vivenna's story, but I really haven't, and I can't think of a real reason why. I can't put my finger on it, but I haven't been. I think Vasher's super cool, but
That was the case. That was the case with me with Siri on my first read, Paul, and Siri's definitely grown on me the second read of mine. But I just wasn't that interested in Siri on my first read.
Yeah, it's not like there's anything wrong with Vivenna's storyline.
I think I like I may have said this before. I think I actually like the Vivenna storyline the most myself, just because I'm the most intrigued by her character journey and the way that she's kind of going on this path of learning to see things from the other side. She comes from a very kind of not necessarily kind of sheltered or kind of one way of seeing things, closed mindedness, and being exposed to this other culture and being exposed to her people who lived in this culture and seeing them kind of for the first time and the way it's opening her eyes is an interesting journey. It's not nearly as exciting, although it does get pretty exciting in this section actually, because that's where our major plot twist comes in. Yeah, I still like the other storylines. I still think Light Song is intriguing, and I've grown into the Siri storyline a little more as we've gone. I didn't really care too much about her early on, honestly. She just seemed a little obnoxious to start with, but I'm growing more and more into her storyline. Actually, I am very curious to see what's going to happen there between the two of them.
So let's go ahead and talk about this plot point from Vivenna's story. So this whole time she's been with Denth and Tonk Fa and the ruffians, and they've been stirring up trouble in the city. And Denth has been manipulating her as she comes to realize here that war is inevitable. You need to prepare the Idrians in the city for war. And we're going to sabotage Hallandrin as much as we can. And she gets kidnapped by Vasher. And Vasher's like, you're causing a bunch of trouble. But Vasher assumes that Vivenna is like intentionally doing this, but he soon learns that Vivenna is not intentionally doing this, and so Vivenna goes back to Denth's hideout after getting free from Vasher, learns that Parlin, her Idrian buddy, who she kind of had a crush on, he kind of had a crush on her. There was, I don't know, a weird love triangle blooming there between her, Jewel, and Parlin. And Denth kills Parlin because he assumes that Vivenna has betrayed them to Vasher, but little did they know it's just a misunderstanding. So what are your guys' thoughts on Denth turning into like this evil character? Maybe not evil, but antagonistic character towards Vivenna and Vasher.
I talked before how so much of this story was we don't know who's on what side, and we don't know who to trust, and we don't know quite who to root for. And I think Denth and company were at the very top of my list of people who I was trying to figure out can we trust them? Can we not? And we get our definitive answer here of, nope, definitely cannot trust Denth and Tonk Fa and the rest of them. Um, I I guess it caught me a little off guard just in the way that it was definitely a bit of a dark turn for Vivenna's storyline. It wasn't just that they're on the wrong side, that she can't trust them. They've been manipulating her and killing the Idrian agents that her father is sending to get to her. And Tonk Fa apparently has a thing for torture, which is nasty and a little scary. And yeah, that whole scene in the basement there in the cellar was, yeah, dark.
With Denth, I didn't see it coming, so I would consider that a plus. Like, it wasn't predictable from my reading. Um, as far as like him being the bad guy, I think it works pretty naturally. Like not like you'd expect it, but like in a good way of like surprising. But it was someone we know, like So I think it was, I guess, a good, I don't know, outstanding move. Like for the storyline, I don't have any real like emotional feelings towards it. Like, I'm not like, oh my gosh, Denth, like like he was the bad guy. Um, so yeah, I guess I don't have any major thoughts, which is a little lame, but
It's okay.
but yeah, it
So
was a good twist.
when I read this for the first time, I was spoiled in that I knew that Vasher was a good guy before I read the book. And you're kind of supposed to figure that because Vasher's in the prologue, but I guess Zeth is in the prologue of The Way of Kings, so maybe that doesn't really line up.
It's all fuzzy.
So it's like I knew that Vasher was gonna be a good guy by the end of the book, and so I wasn't really surprised at this twist when I read this book for the first time. So when Denth is set up as a good guy and then having this huge rivalry with Vasher, I was like, oh well, this isn't gonna last very long, and it lasted longer than I thought it would. Actually, when I was reading this book, it lasts until about 3/5 of the way through the book. So I don't know. I was kind of like you, Paul. I was rather underwhelmed by the twist here, but that's because I was spoiled.
I will say, like, I mean, I haven't had anything about this story spoiled or anything, but I've just kind of always assumed Vasher was a good guy. I mean, you could like see, like, okay, maybe he could be bad, but everything we've seen of him, we kind of know he's like a good guy still. I feel like the only time he's ever portrayed as a potential bad guy deliberately is like from other people's perspective, like, oh, who was here, and it's like where Vasher had been or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, I never thought he would be bad, I guess, unless it really happened. But I've always kind of thought of him as good. He's kind of like a Batman character. He's like good. He's a good guy, but he's like very dark theme, like edge. I don't know, dark alleyways, like works in the shadows kind of thing, and all this stuff. He probably talks like in some dark, like low grumbly voice like this or something, you
Right.
know. And
well, was it last week or 2 weeks ago that we ended with a chapter where he's kind of like perched on a roof and he's looking down at Denth and his party, and he's like, I'm gonna have to kill them someday or something like that. He's just like super dark and brooding, and it's like heavy Batman vibes.
Bruce Wayne.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that angle a lot, actually. I think you may be onto something there. Of Vasher kind of slipping into the rough around the edges good guy sort of, trope.
I always pictured him as Strider.
That's like gruff, a very gruff man, you know. Um, I think if this were adapted to a like movie scenario or show or something like that, I feel like it would very much have to highlight Vasher. I feel like that would be the cool selling point, like the edgy ranger in the night, like I don't know, kind of character trope. So
You guys want to talk about Siri for a little bit?
sure.
So, specifically, Siri is learning quite a bit about what's happening in the palace, or what she thinks is happening in the palace, as far as she can figure out. That not all is well with the God King and heirs and things like that. There's something very suspicious going on with the priests. Obviously, we've known that for a little while now, but she's getting fairly scared, not necessarily for her own life, because she's figured out that she has to produce a son, and so she's safe from people conspiring against her for now. But she's concerned for Sasebrin's life, and she makes a deal with Bluefingers to get them out of the palace if things start going poorly for them. You guys have any predictions on this? Can we trust Bluefingers? Do you guys know?
If there's one character that we've seen in our story throughout all of this that I trust the least, or like at least have the most worry about if they're trustable, it's probably Bluefingers. He just seems set up to be this like, oh yes, like I serve the God King or whatever, and is like pulling strings behind the scenes,
Okay.
running other stuff, especially with kind of all the conspiracy stuff we've seen. He could very well still be a good guy. I just don't. I think he's very like suspicious.
Okay. I thought you were going to go the other direction with that. I thought you were going to say, if there's one character I trust, it's Bluefingers, but
maybe I don't know. Maybe it's his name, like Bluefingers. Like, it just doesn't sound trustworthy or something.
It's
Like
a mafia name.
yeah, I'm not of. I can't tell, but it seems very suspicious. Like if he is bad, I wouldn't be that shocked. I would be like, oh, I could believe it, you know. But if he's also good, I could also believe that. So very neutral, but very polarizing. I could see either side.
I'm neutral on this too, but leaning I think the opposite direction as you, Paul. So far the vibe I've gotten from Bluefingers has been very, this guy's a little shifty, but seems to be honestly trying to help Siri, and so that at least that has kind of won me over to thinking, this guy's at least trying to help Siri, so I like that about him and I want to trust him, but I got to say we don't know a ton about his like culture or religion that he's from, the Pankal, I think they're
yep.
called. And I think it's in these chapters that Siri gets all of her like handmaids to be, or maybe that's later. That might be later. We don't know enough about the pawn call for me to trust necessarily what his motives are. I'm not sure what his motives are. So yeah, if he turns out to be a behind the scenes villain here, I wouldn't be totally shocked, but from what we've seen so far, I want to trust the guy. He seems like he's there to help. I got to say I think what I'm trying to figure out the most is actually going a little bit back to the whole Denth discussion. Who is Denth working for? I that I think might be the biggest question hanging above my head right now. Is he we get the impression, yeah, he's trying to start a war, but who's pulling the strings? Is it Denth who's pulling the strings, or is it someone else who's controlling him? Denth doesn't really seem like the mastermind kind of character, so is it someone like Bluefingers, pulling the strings and hiring Denth maybe? But I think there's somebody out there. I wonder who it is.
Could it be Blushweaver? Doesn't she have some motives to go to war?
She's the obvious. She's the one who's been most vocal about going to war that we've seen, right? She's very much on that crusade of trying to go to war. So that would be maybe the obvious answer is she's gone and hired a bunch of people to make that happen.
We've seen her do that, haven't we? We've seen her do under the table deals to try to get like war votes in the court of gods, but we haven't seen her interact with Dent at all. So
Blushweaver is the character that I feel like I don't understand well enough. I think it's honestly just like, so reading these chapters, I'll be honest, it is like, it feels like we're covering more pages and stuff quicker than like others. I feel like I'm not like dwelling on it as much. So I do feel like I missed some details that may be important, but I think details in general in this book are less important than the small details. Everything seems to have significance in our Stormlight Archive series. But I feel like on in that respect, I feel like I don't fully understand Blushweaver. She seems just kind of I don't know, wild god figure like Light Song, but not like too important. So I don't actually know.
So much intrigue. Who is on what side and who? It seems like all of our characters are spread out on this massive spectrum. You know, no one is your cookie cutter hero, and no one is your obvious. Oh, there's the villain. It's very much a where do they fall in the spectrum, and it may not even be a one-dimensional spectrum. We've got
right.
like other different factions that are working against each other. Are they more aligned towards this group or that group, or are they out for themselves? It seems like we're very much spread across a whole range of what side they're on sort of discussions.
Yeah. I'm not going to tell you how important or not important Blushweaver is, Paul. You're going to have to read and find out, as Brandon Sanchez's t-shirt says.
Okay. I will just assume she's not that important until she proves otherwise. So
that's fair.
Just watch. It's actually Blushweaver who's returned version of Shallan.
No, she's Yasna. She's Yasna.
Oh, okay. Yep.
They're
there we go.
homies. They're god homies now.
That's where Yasna went in Words of Radiance. Is she just went over to Warbreaker, chilled there for a little bit, and went back at the end of Words of Radiance?
Exactly. It all adds up, and you cannot say otherwise.
Don't question it.
Don't even try. People have been trying for minutes now, and to no avail. I will say, I think I'll be honest, I'm not super invested in the story overall, but I do really like the series storyline, and I'm really happy that they're kind of like, I feel like they're kind of figuring it out right now. It's always like, as we've been reading, it's like, okay, we'll wait till later to see what they can figure out. And now I feel like they're kind of figuring it out with like, oh, okay, it's kind of weird that the God Kings typically die right after producing their heir. Stuff like that, and I feel like they're trying to find a way to like break the chain here, and I'm really excited to see how that goes. That and Vasher and his sword are like my two like what's really keeping me interested in reading. So,
can we talk about Nightblood and Vivenna's first interaction with Nightblood? She's in this alleyway, and she sees Nightblood on the floor, and she's about to get mugged by some thugs that she was mugged by a couple weeks ago when she's a beggar. And one of the thugs picks up Nightblood and kills all of his companions with Nightblood while it's still sheathed. He doesn't even take the sheath off, and he just like clubs these guys to death with this sheathed sword, and then he kills himself with it. And then Vivenna's like, "What just happened? What are your what are your guys' thoughts on Nightblood?"
I think Nightblood is super sick. I'm a little equal parts amazed and equal parts terrified. Because we don't understand how he does it, but he really does it. Doesn't it say like it seemed like the sword like was like taking over the man's arm, almost like
Yep.
there was stuff like all over his arm.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of like menacing. I almost get the vision of like, well, I referenced Batman, and now I'm gonna reference Venom. I almost get like a Venom, kind of like the black stuff like coming up all over the person's arm and stuff like that. Was kind of what I envisioned there.
The effect that Nightblood has on Vivenna directly is interesting too, because in one of these chapters, when Vasher first, takes her captive, he like forces her to hold the sword, and she just feels like nauseous,
Yep.
like to the point where she's like puking because of this like terrible effect the sword is having on her, which is odd. We don't seem to see that with the like thugs and other characters that Vasher or that Nightblood seems to, possess or do whatever he does. So why this effect on Vivenna? Or maybe he is having that effect on everyone and we're just inside Vivenna's head, so we see that. I was intrigued by that aspect of it.
I was too, and I thought about this, Elliot, because it made me instantly think of like Kaladin's like problem with grabbing a shard blade. Like it didn't every time he tried to grab a shard blade. For him, he like heard screaming and stuff right there. He like felt like the agony of the people the shard blade had killed.
Yeah.
And so I kind of thought of this in the same vein of like I don't have an explanation why, not the slightest clue, but like that's what I thought of, that kind of comparison. That maybe there's, I don't know, some spren thing that doesn't add up here, and so she can't hold this shard blade or shard blades in general. Or Nightblood confuses me because I can't tell if he's just some different spren we haven't seen, or if he's a spren, or if he's something different. Like I don't really know. So I would like a book on Nightblood's origin.
Yeah, this probably is the book on Nightblood's
I was
origin.
gonna say you're reading
maybe,
it.
maybe so. Well, we haven't seen. Hopefully, we see that. That'd be really cool. I hope we see his actual like more about Nightblood specifically. But
so
I feel like this is his cameo book, is the way I've thought of it. It's like, oh, let's see what Nightblood can do.
Well,
but what has Nightblood done? Like where's he been?
If Nightblood is the sword that Szeth has just taken possession of, I imagine we're going to be seeing more of this character, sword/character. So maybe that's coming.
No, yeah, I'm really excited for that. I'm super excited.
So, Trevor, you're gonna have to help me out here because I'm trying to remember what we read in one of the previous chapters. I was thinking to the effect that Nightblood seems to have on people, and we got a reference back when Vasher broke into that one of the gods' palaces. There was a brief reference to like tempting the hearts of unpure men, and am I crazy? Was that a reference in there somewhere?
I believe so, but I'm not having the best memory at the moment.
Okay. I'm pretty sure that was like a one-liner reference to that, and I'm trying to draw some connections to that and what we've seen so far. We've seen Vivenna pick up the sword and have like a really adverse reaction to it, but we've seen that in that scene in the palace that the servant was like drawn towards it, whereas Vivenna seems like very drawn away from it. And I'm wondering if that has to do with like the purity of their heart or like intent or something like that. Maybe Vivenna is very pure of intent and honest, and so she has like a very nasty reaction when she touches the sword, whereas the person who's not pure of heart is drawn towards it or something like that. And I actually wonder too because I don't think we've seen Vasher wield Nightblood it much, if at all. He uses
throws
it
it at
as
people.
more right. He's like, yeah, go do your thing, go do your thing. And I wonder if like does Vasher have this like really nauseous reaction to Nightblood as well? Is Vasher a good guy who is pure of intentions and he, feels really nasty when he touches a sword, which is why he uses it the way he does. I'm trying to draw some connections there. Maybe we need to read a little more and get some more evidence to throw in that bucket, but that's what I'm trying to process on this so far.
It's really strange Vasher's motives to specifically see Vivenna's reaction to the sword, because the way he kidnaps her and then like throws the sword at her to see what happens and then decides not to kill her after that. So there is something happening there with the reaction to the sword, because you're right, the servant, when he broke into the palace, like went for the sword immediately when he saw it, and then when he threw it at Vivenna, she's recoiling and like, whatever, being nauseous. So yeah, there is definitely something there.
And
Sure.
and actually, now that you bring that up, I'm talking myself into even more being convinced of this as we think about it. Because in that scene there, when I first read through it, I just was thinking of Vasher as like intentionally torturing her in a little bit there. I just thought that he was, he knew she would have that terrible reaction to it, so he's, keeping her subdued by throwing the sword at her and making her touch it so she'll feel nauseous. But when you explain that again, that makes perfect sense that maybe it is a bit of a test. Maybe it is a bit of I want to see how you and Nightblood are going to interact here because it's going to tell me something about your motive. That's a really interesting possibility.
That seems pretty likely too. I feel like that would make sense. Vasher seems like the person to do that.
Yeah.
Like not tell you like what he's doing, and so you're like, why did he just make me do this? I hate this. But also I don't know if we have other thoughts before we move on, but I have kind of a big prediction, which I think is less far fetched than the Shalon Light Song one. I think it's more legit,
Okay.
but also it's probably wrong.
Okay.
And it's about Oathbringer and why we're reading this book and then Oathbringer.
Okay.
My guess is whenever we read Oathbringer, we'll see more of Nightblood, and I'm gonna guess that we will. I'm gonna make the prediction that Nightblood and Oathbringer were like either friends or enemies or some way correlated, like related in the Spren world in whatever universe they're in.
Okay.
And we'll see some relations there. And they're going to come into contact because whoever the heck got Oathbringer after Aelin left him at Sadeas Tide, and then Zeth, somehow they're going to clash and they're going to start, I don't know, they're going to be mad at each other or something. It's going to cause a whole lot of drama.
All right.
So I'm going to just guess that Nightblood and Oathbringer know each other.
This is a bunny trail, but we can go down it because we are a Stormlight podcast. We can talk about Stormlight for a second here. At the end of Words of Radiance, we got the reveal that Spren can turn into shard blades. With Sylphrena, she like Kaladin saves her. He says his third ideal. She becomes a shard blade for him. Does that mean that all shard blades are Spren, or does that mean that all Spren are shard blades, or like what is the what
That's a
are there squares? Are there rectangles? What's happening here?
that's a good question, and I think my answer, which sounds lame, is it doesn't actually matter. I think that at least shard blades have a sentience. I'm guessing.
Okay.
So whether that's Spren or something else, like I feel like Nightblood seems different from our. I mean, it's similar. It's just different style, but different from like pattern and Sophrena, right? But ultimately they're about the same. We haven't seen Oathbringer. We haven't seen our other shard blades talk. We've seen our Spren be shard blades, but we haven't seen like the opposite, I guess. But I'm just making the jump because it was Dalinar's notable character and it's titled Oathbringer. I'm just gonna guess that one may be special too. And so maybe we'll see something with that and his correlation to Nightblood. And that would be kind of cool. I didn't know Spren. If we are on the like, shard blades are Spren, like equal on both sides. I guess like, I feel like it's weird that shard or what's his name again? Nightblood.
Nightblood.
Totally forgot instantly. Is like he is here. I don't know. Like our other Spren, like there's no Spren. Right, it's all weird. It's all foggy and stuff. So that's why it's a very far fetched thing. But it's like it's definitely gonna happen. So Trevor's just trying to recover.
Well, while we're bunny trailing on this, I think I want to go out on. I think I want to throw out that I think Spren cannot exist in this world. I think because we haven't seen any Spren, and these people don't seem to be aware of Spren. In back on Roshar, they see Spren everywhere, right? As we've talked about, there's a Spren for everything. There's rocks and water and rain and
Spren, yes,
yeah, you name it, and there's Spren. Like that's just a daily occurrence. And whereas here we haven't seen a single one, and I would think, going off of a few assumptions here, Hoid exists in both places, which leads me to assume that there's some way to travel between the two of them. And if that's true, then I would think more than just Hoid would have done this, and that there's other people that can travel from Roshar to this place as well. And if Spren could exist in this world, I think someone would have brought a shard blade to this world and taken control of it all. It seems like in this world, a shard blade would be, some pretty high powered technology for what we've seen in here. You'd be able to take out a whole army of lifeless pretty easily.
And not only that, but Stormlight in general, right? Like Stormlight would be. I mean, it might not last that long because there's no storms, but there's some technology overlap here. Like, would breaths? Maybe they work on Roshar. Maybe we've had a couple hints with Hoid having breaths. Do shard blades work on Nalthis? Is the realm we're in?
So I'm kind of going down that logic trail to say that if this is kind of assuming that all shard blades are Spren, which I think we talked about that. I think at some point we were told that when a shard blade is summoning, you're resurrecting that Spren in that moment. That's also why
that is what's still said.
That's also why Kaladin hears that scream when he touches the shard blade. It's why Renarin hears that scream when he touches a shard blade. All of that is they're hearing that dead Spren or dying Spren, and all of that to say, I think you can't take a Spren to this world for some reason. There's something about Roshar that is causing Spren, and Spren don't go anywhere else. That is ultimately where I'm going with all of that, and I think why I also, I guess, will use that to say that I don't think Nightblood is a Spren. I think Nightblood is something different. I don't know what yet. I'm hoping we'll learn in this book, but I think Nightblood is something completely different.
He's the Hoid of the like
Exactly.
Chardonnay Bren world.
Exactly.
Mr. Worldwide of the swords.
Yes.
So
Makes sense.
it's okay, so we've seen inanimate objects be awakened by
Yes.
Vasher. Like he'll use ropes or whatever and be like Doc Ock, you know, as long as we're doing our superhero references, and he'll have inanimate objects move for him. Could Nightblood just be an awakened sword that like just has, you know, a billion breaths in him and he's basically sentient at this point?
It's possible. I think it's definitely possible.
Yeah, it would be like, where'd you get all those breaths? But like, hypothetically, yes. Like the reason maybe it talks about him, like, kind of around the sword. It seems like it makes things darker. It's not just a like black sword. It like makes things world around it a little darker. Could be it's gotten so many breaths that it's kind of surpassed the like color spectrum and like is like a black hole almost, like in a sword. Maybe, but
any more theories for episode 51?
no more.
I think I'm theoried out for now.
We do have a handful of new ones. We can call it there, and we can read a little further and reconvene next week. Thanks for joining me, Paul and Eliot, and we'll talk about chapters 40 through 49 next week.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Great.